It was a calm afternoon. Steven Seagal, dressed casually in a jacket and sunglasses, was walking through a quiet city street. He had just finished a small meeting and decided to grab a coffee before heading home. The street was busy enough for people to glance at him, but not crowded, just enough for a peaceful afternoon. Suddenly, out of nowhere, two police officers approached him. At first, it seemed routine, a simple questioning. But one of the officers, for reasons no one could understand, grew tense. His tone was sharp, his stance rigid. He asked Steven for ID, not in a polite way, but in a demanding, almost accusatory tone. Steven remained calm. He handed over his ID, his expression neutral. He wasn't upset, but his presence commanded respect. People nearby started noticing the interaction, pulling out phones to record what was happening. The tension in the air was noticeable. The crowd instinctively knew this was more than a routine stop. Without warning, one officer slapped Steven across the shoulder, a completely unprovoked, aggressive gesture. The crowd gasped. People froze, unsure whether to step in or just watch. A few whispered to each other, "Did that really just happen?" Steven didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He simply turned to the officer, his calm demeanor unwavering. "You okay?" Someone in the crowd asked nervously. Steven gave a small nod. "I'm fine," he said quietly, almost to himself. But behind that calm exterior, a storm of authority and experience was brewing. The cop clearly thought that shock or intimidation would change the situation, but Steven's quiet confidence left no room for misunderstanding. He wasn't someone who could be bullied or rushed into a reaction. The crowd held their breath. Cameras were rolling. Every eye was on the scene, waiting, anticipating. There was a sense that something extraordinary was about to happen. Steven's calm, measured response was magnetic. People couldn't look away. And just like that, the ordinary afternoon had turned into a moment of high tension, a situation that would soon take a dramatic and unforgettable turn. What happens next will shock everyone standing there and change the entire scene forever. The slap had left the crowd stunned. Phones were out, recording every second. Whispers spread like wildfire. Why would he do that? And who is that guy? But no one spoke too loudly. Everyone was waiting to see how Steven Seagal would respond. Steven remained calm, standing straight, his hands visible, his expression controlled. He wasn't angry, but he wasn't passive either. The officers didn't expect his quiet authority. They seemed to think their aggressive behavior would provoke fear or submission. But Steven's presence was different. It carried the weight of experience, discipline, and unwavering confidence. The first officer leaned closer, his voice rising slightly. "Why are you walking here? What are you doing in this area?" "I'm just walking to grab a coffee," Steven replied calmly. "Nothing else." The officer's glare didn't soften. He raised his tone. "ID now." Steven handed it over without a word, maintaining eye contact but never escalating the situation. The tension around him was thick enough to feel. Passers-by had stopped to watch. A few people cautiously approached, holding their phones. The recording wasn't just for social media. Everyone instinctively knew they were witnessing something unusual. As the minutes passed, the officer's frustration became more visible. He paced slightly, tapping his foot, gesturing towards Steven. Yet Steven didn't flinch. His body language was composed, his breathing steady. It was a quiet demonstration of control, showing that he wouldn't be rattled by fear or aggression. The crowd began to murmur. A few bystanders whispered to one another, "I think he's famous, and wait, isn't that Steven Seagal?" Still, the officers seemed oblivious, focused only on intimidating the man in front of them. A young woman in the crowd raised her phone. "I'm recording this," she said quietly. Others followed, capturing the scene from different angles. The tension had grown so much that you could almost hear the collective heartbeat of everyone watching. People didn't know what would happen next, but they knew it wouldn't be ordinary. Steven's calmness had a magnetic effect. It drew the attention of everyone around him. Children peered curiously from behind their parents, and elderly pedestrians slowed their steps, intrigued by the unusual confrontation. The officer's aggression was becoming less intimidating as more people noticed the situation. The crowd's quiet support, even if only through observation and recording, was starting to shift the balance. Then came the engagement moment. Steven glanced around, the corner of his mouth almost smiling. It was subtle, but enough to catch the audience's attention. The tension wasn't gone, but the scene had changed. Before we see what happens next, tell me, where are you watching this from? Drop your country or city in the comments right now. The officer's voice rose again, now sharper, trying to regain control. Stop recording and step back. No one moved. The crowd remained steady, cameras rolling. Steven's calm demeanor had set the tone. The officer realized that intimidation alone wasn't going to work here. Every person watching could sense it. The balance of power was subtly shifting. For Steven, this wasn't about fame or recognition. He wasn't using his status to threaten or intimidate. He simply stood firm, demonstrating that composure and dignity in the face of unfairness was more powerful than aggression. And as the scene played out, it was clear that the crowd, the officers, and anyone watching the recordings would remember this moment for a long time. The stage was set. The confrontation was escalating, and the world was about to see a moment that would shock everyone present. What happened next? Brace yourself. This is where the story takes an unforgettable turn. The tension in the street had reached its peak. Phones were raised high, recording every movement, every word, every subtle gesture. Bystanders watched, holding their breath, wondering what would happen next. Steven Seagal, calm and composed, stood his ground. His posture was firm, his gaze steady. There was no aggression in him, only a quiet, undeniable authority. The officer, frustrated and unaware of the growing attention, stepped closer. "I told you to show respect. You're causing a scene," he barked. His voice echoed off the walls of nearby buildings. The words were meant to intimidate, but Steven remained unfazed. "I'm showing respect," Steven said calmly, his voice steady but carrying weight. "I have nothing to hide." The officer's expression darkened. He raised his hand, as if to gesture for Steven to step back. The crowd tensed. Some people instinctively inched away, fearing escalation. Others, mesmerized, leaned in slightly, unable to look away. Children peeked from behind their parents, sensing the seriousness of the moment. "Don't try to talk your way out of this," the officer snapped. "I could have you arrested for resisting authority." Steven didn't react aggressively. Instead, he subtly shifted his weight, showing he was unshaken. His eyes remained calm, scanning the crowd briefly, noticing the people recording, the whispers spreading, and the growing sense of curiosity among the bystanders. He wasn't trying to intimidate anyone. He was simply standing firm, demonstrating control in the most natural, effortless way. A murmur ran through the crowd. People began to whisper among themselves, "Why is he being treated like this? This isn't right. Who is he?" The collective energy was shifting. The crowd's attention was no longer on the officer alone, but on the tension between authority and calm composure. Meanwhile, Steven's family, who had been standing a few steps behind, looked anxious. His spouse whispered nervously, "Maybe we should leave," and his children clutched their hands together, eyes wide. But Steven shook his head subtly, signaling that he would handle the situation with dignity. He had faced danger before, not just in films, but in real-life situations that required patience and self-control. And now, that experience radiated through his calm presence. The officer, sensing the crowd's attention, tried to assert dominance again. "Step back now. You're causing trouble in public." But the bystanders didn't move. Cameras continued rolling. The tension hung thick in the air, almost tangible. Every person watching could feel the silent standoff. It was clear that this wasn't going to end with a simple warning. The situation demanded a resolution, and all eyes were on Steven. Then came a subtle shift. A woman in the crowd whispered, "Wait, isn't that Steven Seagal?" Her words, though quiet, traveled quickly through the people nearby. Phones were pointed more directly. People leaned forward, and the atmosphere changed. The officer, still unaware of who he was confronting, continued his aggressive posturing. But the energy of the crowd had shifted. The balance of power, however subtle, was beginning to tilt. If this happened right in front of you, what would you do? Would you stay calm like Steven or react? Comment your thoughts below. Steven's eyes scanned the officer carefully, his calm authority radiating to the crowd. He wasn't using fame or intimidation. He was showing that composure, dignity, and self-control in the face of unfairness could speak louder than anger or aggression. The crowd was fully engaged now, recording, whispering, and holding their collective breath. Everyone sensed that the situation was about to change dramatically. The officer's aggression was failing, and the calm, commanding presence of Steven Seagal had begun to take control of the scene without a single raised hand. And just like that, the ordinary street scene had transformed into a moment of high tension, one that would soon become unforgettable for everyone watching, and for millions who would later see it online. What happens next? Brace yourself, because the moment the officer realizes who he's dealing with is coming very soon. The tension on the street was palpable. Phones remained raised, cameras rolling, capturing every moment. Every person in the crowd felt the suspense. No one wanted to look away, yet no one wanted to interfere. Steven Seagal, calm and composed, continued standing his ground. His expression was neutral, his body language relaxed, but every subtle movement communicated confidence and control. The officer, still unaware of who he was confronting, continued to assert authority. "Step back now," he barked, trying to regain dominance. His words were sharp, his tone commanding, but they lacked the weight of the quiet power that Steven radiated. Every word felt forced, every gesture exaggerated. Then, almost imperceptibly, a bystander in the crowd leaned toward her friend, whispering nervously, "Isn't that Steven Seagal?" The words, barely audible, seemed to travel instantly. People turned toward the whispered conversation, curiosity rippling through the crowd like a wave. Phones angled to get a better view, and the whispers spread. "Wait, isn't that Steven Seagal? The actor, the martial artist?" The officer remained oblivious. He still saw only a man standing calmly, unafraid of his aggression. But the crowd had begun to shift. Murmurs grew louder, spreading from person to person. Eyes widened as recognition dawned, and the once tense atmosphere began to crack with disbelief. The street was no longer just a confrontation between one officer and a single civilian. It had transformed into a moment of public awareness, a silent acknowledgement of a presence that commanded respect without aggression. Steven's calm demeanor never changed. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't gesture or shout to reveal his identity. He simply stood, allowing the situation to unfold naturally, confident that his composure alone would speak volumes. He wasn't trying to intimidate the officer or the crowd. He was simply present, a demonstration of dignity and control that drew attention naturally. People in the crowd whispered excitedly, nudging one another. "That's him. That's Steven Seagal." Others leaned closer to catch every movement. Phones recorded the scene from multiple angles, capturing the officer's increasing frustration alongside Steven's steady, unshakable calm. The dynamic was shifting subtly but unmistakably. The officer, frustrated that his commands were having no effect, gestured sharply, his impatience growing. "Stop all this. I'm giving you one last warning." His voice carried authority, but the crowd no longer responded with fear. Instead, they watched intently, captivated by the silent power struggle unfolding before them. A child in the crowd tugged at their parent's sleeve, whispering, "Mom, is that really him?" The parent nodded slightly, wide-eyed. The recognition wasn't just about fame. It was about the aura of control, the calm authority Steven exuded. Every movement, every measured step, showed the contrast between aggression and quiet power. Have you ever seen someone calm and confident completely change the energy of a situation? Comment yes or no and tell us what you would do. The officer's frustration was becoming visible, his confidence shaken subtly by the energy of the crowd. Meanwhile, Steven's family, still standing nearby, watched silently. They could see the shift in the officer, the awareness in the crowd, and the attention he commanded without force. The crowd's whispers turned into low murmurs of admiration. He's not reacting angrily. He's just calm, confident. Look at the way he's standing, so composed. I can't believe the officer doesn't know who he's dealing with. As the scene unfolded, the tension reached a new peak. The recognition had changed the balance subtly but dramatically. The officer's aggression no longer dominated the moment. The silent authority of Steven Seagal was beginning to take hold, influencing not just the crowd, but the officer himself. And in that moment, every person watching, in person or on the videos being recorded, could sense that something extraordinary was about to happen. The calm before the storm, the anticipation, the suspense, all were building toward a reveal that no one in the crowd would ever forget. And now, the moment everyone has been waiting for, the turning point is just about to happen. The whispers had spread through the crowd like wildfire. People were starting to recognize the man standing calmly in front of the aggressive officer. "That's Steven Seagal," one bystander muttered. "The actor, martial artist, the guy who's trained so many people." The realization rippled through the crowd, and suddenly, the balance of energy in the street shifted. The officer, still unaware of who he was confronting, tried to maintain control. "Step back," he barked, his tone sharper than before. "I'm giving you a final warning." His gestures were exaggerated, his frustration growing, but the effect he hoped for was failing. The calm composure of Steven Seagal was like a magnet, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. Steven didn't flinch. He stood tall, his shoulders squared, his breathing steady. He didn't shout. He didn't move aggressively, but his presence alone commanded attention. Every person watching, from children peeking behind their parents to adults holding phones and cameras, felt the intensity of the moment. The street, once tense and uncertain, now buzzed with anticipation. Then came a moment that changed everything. Steven's voice, calm yet firm, broke the silence. "I am the new chief." The words were simple, but they carried a weight no one could ignore. The crowd collectively gasped. Phones wavered in the air as bystanders captured the moment from every angle. People froze mid-step, whispering in disbelief. Did he just say that? The new chief. The officer. He doesn't know what he's dealing with. The officer's jaw tightened. He stepped back slightly, the authority in his stance faltering. For the first time, the imbalance in the confrontation became visible. The aggressive energy he had relied on was being neutralized, not by confrontation or argument, but by calm, unwavering authority. The crowd's energy shifted dramatically. Murmurs turned into low cheers, but no one shouted. The respect for the situation and Steven's composure kept the excitement controlled. People leaned forward to see the reactions of the officer, who was now visibly unsure of himself. His confident gestures became hesitant. His words lost some of their edge. Even Steven's family, standing a few steps behind, noticed the subtle change. The worry in their eyes softened. The tension that had gripped them for so long began to ease, replaced by awe at the way he managed the situation without aggression or anger. If you were there in this moment, how would you react? Would you remain calm like Steven or feel the tension like everyone else? Comment below with your answer. The officer attempted to regain his authority, clearing his throat, trying to assert dominance through words alone. "I don't care who you are. You can't just." But the effect of Steven's calm declaration had already taken hold. The crowd, now fully aware of the man's identity and his confidence, silently supported him. It wasn't about fame or intimidation. It was about respect and authority grounded in composure. The officer's previous attempts at aggression seemed petty in comparison. Some bystanders began nodding to themselves, quietly acknowledging the power of calm over anger. Others whispered to their friends, "This is incredible. Look at how calm he is." He didn't even raise his voice. The tension, once heavy and suffocating, began to crack. People were no longer afraid of the confrontation. They were witnessing a lesson in authority and respect, a real-life demonstration of how composure and self-control could change a situation instantly. The officer's gestures became smaller, hesitant, his voice softer. The crowd leaned in, sensing the turning point was complete. Steven's calm authority had effectively neutralized aggression, commanded attention, and set the stage for the next moment, one that would leave everyone watching speechless. And just like that, the confrontation was about to flip completely. The moment of instant regret was approaching, and no one in the crowd would forget it. The air had shifted completely. The crowd's whispers had grown louder, and cameras were capturing every moment from every angle. People weren't just watching a confrontation anymore. They were witnessing a turning point. Steven Seagal had stood his ground, remained calm, and declared his authority with a quiet power that demanded attention. But the final moment, the one that would change everything, was about to arrive. A backup officer, arriving from nearby, paused mid-step as he took in the scene. His eyes widened, and his hand instinctively went to his radio. "Sir, that's Steven Seagal," he said softly, barely audible over the murmurs of the crowd. "The actor, the martial artist, he's here." The crowd's reaction was instant. Phones lifted higher, people whispered excitedly, and even some bystanders let out soft gasps. The officer who had started the confrontation froze. His aggressive stance faltered, and a flush of realization spread across his face. The energy he had tried to project moments earlier was now crumbling. Steven's calm presence didn't waver. He didn't smirk. He didn't raise his voice. He simply allowed the moment to unfold naturally. The crowd, now fully aware of who he was, watched as the power dynamic shifted entirely. What had begun as an aggressive, tense standoff had transformed into a demonstration of respect and authority. The officer, once so confident, now looked uncomfortable. He muttered something under his breath, shifting his weight from one foot to another. His hands, once gesturing aggressively, now hung limply at his sides. He had no idea how to respond to the quiet authority Steven radiated. Bystanders cheered softly, clapping, while others whispered words of admiration. "Look at how calm he is. He didn't raise his voice once. That's incredible." The crowd's energy was infectious. The tension that had dominated the street moments ago had been replaced by a sense of awe. Steven took a small step forward, addressing the officer with a measured, calm tone. "Respect is earned, not demanded. You can't intimidate people into compliance, but you can lead with composure." His words weren't harsh. They were clear, firm, and carried the weight of experience. The officer, now fully aware of who he had confronted, lowered his head slightly. He didn't make a scene. There was no confrontation, no shouting, only quiet regret. He had misjudged someone based on appearances and aggression, and the lesson was instant. The crowd, sensing the complete reversal, erupted into soft applause and murmurs of admiration. Cameras continued rolling, capturing the moment in perfect detail. People were already whispering to one another, "This is going viral," and "I can't believe what just happened." Even Steven's family, who had been quietly observing, smiled subtly, seeing the situation resolve without escalation. The officer's aggression had been neutralized not with force or anger, but with composure, clarity, and dignity. The lesson was clear. Calm authority could transform a tense confrontation into a moment of respect. Have you ever seen someone instantly regret their actions? Type yes or no in the comments. How would you react in a moment like this? The crowd continued to whisper and record, replaying the moment in their minds and on their phones. Every person watching sensed that this wasn't just an ordinary confrontation. It was a lesson in patience, composure, and authority. Steven had turned an aggressive, tense encounter into a public display of dignity and respect. And just like that, the moment that could have ended in chaos had become one of admiration, a story that would soon reach millions online. People would talk about it for days, retell it for months, and remember how calm, measured authority could shift the energy of an entire street in seconds. What happened next? The world would see the aftermath, and it would inspire millions. The story wasn't over yet. The crowd slowly began to disperse, but the energy lingered in the air. People whispered to each other, replaying the moment in their minds and on their phones. Steven Seagal had stood calmly, faced aggression without anger, and turned a tense confrontation into a lesson in respect and composure. Everyone who witnessed it knew they had seen something extraordinary. Videos from the scene began circulating instantly. Phones captured every detail. The initial slap, Steven's calm stance, the officer's growing frustration, and finally, the moment of recognition that completely shifted the dynamic. Within hours, clips were shared online, and people from around the world were watching, commenting, and sharing their own reactions. The story went viral, not because of violence, but because of courage, composure, and dignity. Millions were inspired by the way Steven had handled the situation. People commented on his calm authority, noting how he didn't escalate the confrontation or retaliate. Instead, he demonstrated that true strength lies in self-control and confidence. The officer involved faced internal review. The department acknowledged the inappropriate behavior and the importance of proper conduct during public interactions. There was no dramatic retaliation or exaggeration, only an official acknowledgement that aggression was not justified. The message was clear: calm, respectful authority should always guide public service. Meanwhile, the crowd who witnessed the scene felt a renewed sense of empowerment. They saw firsthand how composure and dignity could transform a tense situation. Parents explained to their children how respecting others and standing firm without aggression could change the energy of any encounter. Friends discussed the moment endlessly, impressed by the silent power Steven displayed. Steven's family quietly observed, proud of the way he handled everything. He hadn't sought attention or recognition. He had simply stayed calm, made the right decisions in the moment, and turned a potentially harmful situation into a positive example. His actions reminded everyone that reacting with anger or aggression is rarely the most effective way to handle conflict. If you believe calmness and respect can overcome aggression, type respect in the comments below. Share this story with someone who needs to see it. The story also sparked discussion online about authority, fairness, and the power of composure. People debated how public encounters could be handled better and shared stories of times they had witnessed or experienced similar confrontations. Steven's example became a teaching moment, a reminder that leadership and dignity don't require shouting or intimidation. By the end of the day, the incident had reached millions of viewers. Clips were replayed, discussions were ongoing, and the lesson was clear. Remaining calm, confident, and respectful in the face of aggression is not just effective, it's inspiring. Steven Seagal's quiet authority had left a lasting impression on everyone present and those watching online. As the sun set over the street, what could have been a moment of embarrassment and anger had instead become a story of respect, courage, and dignity. People left, inspired and amazed, carrying the memory of the encounter with them. This is proof that calm, respect, and composure can change any situation and leave a lasting impact on the world.